least that works.
All right. Well, I'm going to call this meeting next order in open session. First item is number 6, public comment period. Lydia, it doesn't seem like we got anybody signed up.
No.
So we'll move on to item number 7, which Mayor Robertson is not here. I thought it'd be nice for everybody to see what we're going to give him. It's the little electric meter deal. And Mayor Robertson served on this board from 2010 until today, and we appreciate his leadership. 2010. That's right.
He was a regular member and then.
That's right.
I mean, this is a stepping stone.
This is
With a bug in it, so we put it in all.
I believe that was a 1920 electric. Anyway, we appreciate his leadership, his service to this board and to the city, and this is our little token of appreciation for this. Next item is item number 8, presentation, discussion, update report by the Director of Electric Utilities regarding customer service, business center practices, procedures, and policies, billing procedures, and LP&L staffing and performance. Mr. McCullough.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As is customary, I'll give a few highlights of this written report, and then our staff here to respond to any questions you might have. On page 9, you see the graph, comparison graphs. We're still in really good shape in terms of the rate comparisons of other utilities in the state, well below the state average for cost of electricity. On page 11, some of our owned media, as it's referred to here, is really increased in traffic, and I think part of that is the powerful pointers messages that have been going out in the newsroom. So that social media stuff has really taken off. On page 14, I always like to put highlights on the notes for the business office recap, and set another record, or almost a record this month, with the second lowest call count the past 5 years. So really managing, I guess the fact that we didn't have a lot of outages, the fact that the weather was good, we just haven't had a lot of traffic for so long. And then there's also better information on the monthly statement in the LP&L website, so more people can handle their business online now than what used to do. So we've also had training, and we've got another group of call center folks released to the call center floor this month. So there's always kind of a continuous process. You got new folks coming in and getting training, and then when they're training, they start doing the job. And then on the deposits, we have now refunded over $2 million in deposits to our customers, which since the board approved that automatic deposit repayment, that's working pretty well. On page 17, just want to call highlight to the fact that the substation department completed installation of that 200 MVA transformer at McDonald's. It's a big project, important project for reliability of our system this summer. And then on page 18, we've got that outage graph now. I don't know if was this in the report last month?
No.
Okay, so this is a new graph that we put together. The little red curve there is a rolling 12-month average of the outage history. So every data point on that red curve is the average of the last, or the 12 months prior month's history. So you can kind of see the trend line on how it's going. We're at about 70 right now if you look at it on an annual basis. I would like to see us get down to about 53. If you get below 53 minutes per customer of outage time per year, then your customers are generally pretty satisfied. Now that green curve is accurate. It's the industry average. The folks that follow these reports at PUC, that's what you typically see is something in that range. But I think we can do better. And a lot of the projects that we have in our CIP are reliable type projects, and it should help that trend line come down over time. And you can kind of watch that and see if we're actually impacting that curve. And I did want to announce also. I think you've received the electronic version of it now. So when you get back to your email, you'll see this. But I just wanted to announce that Andy Burcham has been promoted to Assistant Director of Electric Utilities. He's going to retain the Chief Financial Officer responsibilities as well. But he's just been a joy to work with, and really he's all about integrity and dedication, and he shows effort, expertise, and professionalism to really turn his utility around. I just wanted to hit some of the highlights of things that he's been responsible for, primarily since he's been here. Rate stability and creating this new PPR methodology, which really results in methodical increases in the base rate so that we don't have the rate shock that was experienced a few years ago. On the capital program, we've closed out old projects and put the process in place to identify long-range projects, and he and his staff have done a great job putting this budget together. Really sweat the details on that. And then ERCOT, of course, he was working on the RFP process even before I came to work here, and he really had things rolling along pretty good. Part of that review team and part of the team that's working on this transition. And then building improvements that have already been made, and other building improvements that we'll be looking at in the future. Andy's going to be working on those. So I'm proud to work with Andy, and he's doing a great job. That's the end of my report, unless you have any questions.
Question, I didn't ask it in a few months, so is there any progress? You mentioned the website. Is there any progress on getting rid of the paper mailouts for online payment folks?
I think it's maybe.
Yeah, I mean, next year I think that'll happen. We are looking at different ways that we could actually do that now. Would be a very manual process right now, but we're also, and Chad had just mentioned a moment ago, that we have about $50,000 in next year's budget that will complete that transition where we can offer the paperless billing to our customers. So that's on the front burner for us to do that, and it's just with the current, we have about 13 different vendors that handle our billing and our statements, and we're trying to whittle that down to one or two, so it's a more seamless exercise. And so hopefully in this next fiscal year we'll have all that completed, but I hope that we get the paperless done a little bit sooner.
Well, we're doing the paperless, it's just, we don't.
You can look online at your bill, and you get all the information you get on your statement. It's just right now we haven't found a capability to turn it off for some and leave it on for others. So it seems like it would be an easy process to do, but in our billing system it's not quite so simple. So
It's going to happen.
yeah, we're working on that, and we'll get there as soon as we can.
David, we were at a meeting the other day, I guess that was the Imagine Mother folks, and we were talking about average daily system load. In our chart, what I recollected was about 350 megawatts. Is that, of course, this is just April, month of April,
Yeah.
so it looks like the peak was about 380, something like that.
What do we have 2.7 million megawatt hours a year, so about 365. Yeah, just looking at April, it's right around 300. Of course, in the summertime, we'll get up around 600.
Around 600, yeah.
It's really hot. So.
It's just a number for the year. So. Other questions? Mr. Bowman?
Hang on page 19, your gas turbine number 2 is unavailable. What's wrong with that?
Right. That's the unit that we sent off for repairs. It came back and had some vibration issues. We went through a troubleshooting process on it. The unit, the vibration equipment that we had still was showing vibration, but the guys that did the rework on it said there's not any vibration issues on it. So we had some additional equipment brought in that said, yes, there is some vibration problems there. And so that unit has been sent back off to the factory.
So basically, Cook is not available.
Yeah, Cook is not generating anything right now. GT3 is we've hired a contractor to come in and write a work scope for the repairs on it. Don't have a range of prices on that yet. We should have that pretty quick. And then of course Cook 1 and 2 we're mothballed. They're in mothball status right now.
So you don't think we'll have any problem with that bill, heating, weather heats up?
Actually, actually, Blair and Michael are in Denver today. They're actually meeting with our counterparts at Excel Energy, talking. Every year we have this operating committee meeting, so they're up there now talking about it. So they may have a different story when they get back. I think we're all right.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. McConnell. I'm going to ask that we move, the board, that we move item 11 up to the next item, and that's consider a resolution authorizing the regulated utilities to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement bind between Logan Power and Light and Han Public Communications for professional services related to marketing campaigns, marketing, social research, and other communications related activities. Mr. Rose.
As you all know, we work with Han Public Communication, and we have since August of 2013. They really act as our, sole communication function here. I work with them. They manage our website. They manage social media. Basically, everything that you see that's put out by us, they do the graphic design. They do the messaging for it. I work closely with them. Our contract with Han is for $251 with a 25% rider on it. That brings it to just over $314,000 a year. In the 2 years prior, we've gone into that contingency rider. In 13-14, we were at 279. In 14-15, we were at 272. The difference between those first 2 years and this year is the sheer amount of work that they've done on ERCOT, and the fact that surrounding the 2019 kind of go live and the public rollout of that, we had a fairly large paid media push behind that, and that was paid through the Han contract. And so because of that, we've now reached the upper limits, and so coming to you to ask that you amend that for initial $75,000 so we can continue working with them for the remainder of the year.
I believe there's a resolution. Yes, oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Bell has a question.
When we entered into this, we were already in the non-competitive world, right?
Yes.
When we set this 251.
Yes.
I read this, I was looking for areas that maybe we could reduce what they do to cover what we're adding. I didn't really see anything that jumped out at me, but have we considered?
One of the things that we're going to do in the first two budget years, the first two contract years, when we went out for RFP and we got responses back, Han was approximately half of the price of the other respondents. And that's because they are primarily a communications firm. The other folks that put in were marketing firms. And included in their contract was the placement of media and the cost of buying media.
The placement of what?
Of media, paid media. So the way that we have operated up to this point is that when we needed to purchase media, we went through Han, and that got tacked onto the contract, even though that's not something that was originally budgeted for. And so what we're going to do going forward is I'm going to place those ads myself and take those out of that contract. And so today we've spent right at $71,000 for paid media, and that is the 2019 rollout, that is Powerful Pointers, that is the safety and education promotion that we put out. So basically, what we're doing is that amount of $75,000. I still have that in the larger budget for conservation education. It's just not in the contract amount for hauling, if that makes sense.
75 plus 75 is the net of what you're going to pull out and what you feel like needs to be added back in.
Right. And so, for that paid media that has been taken off of the Han contract, that's what this is covering. And so here going forward, I'm going to place that media myself out of my larger budget. The city has an ad buyer that they have just entered in with. And so, we'll be working with them, and that way Han will be strictly creative. And then in the coming years, we're going to take a look at this contract and see if there aren't things that we can do in-house. Because I agree with you, going forward, we first hired them, they had massive projects that they had to work on. The first year they did the bill and the website for us. The second year they put in place the LISD program and in all of these major initiatives that we undertook. You know, this year it's been 2019. You know, going forward, it's going to be building on that success, but it's not going to be creating new initiatives. And so I do think that there are areas in the next few years that we can look at that we can bring in-house as opposed to doing, you know, them through the HON contract.
Yeah, $389,000 for the money, but maybe that's what it costs. I'm not questioning that, but I appreciate that you're gonna massage that over the next year and see if maybe we can skinny it down some.
Absolutely.
Just so I'm clear, when I read the summary, I really wasn't clear on what we were doing, but if you read the contract, the amendment to professional service agreement, it's pretty straightforward. They're doing more work because of the transition into ERCOT, and they've reached their ceiling, and they need to get a $75,000 increase. My question is that for the rest of the contract? I think we've got, 2 years left on it?
Right.
Where the staff can renew it without our consent every year, correct?
Right. That will change the not to exceed amount in the contract. And so when we do those renewals, that will affect that. Now, in my budget, in the budget I'm submitting this year, that 314 is still what I'm going to hold firm to. That contract is going to be moved to a not to exceed 389. But for my budget, I'm going to hold steady to that 314. The difference being that the paid media is not going to be run through that contract anymore. That will be paid outside. So that will be not counting off the overall contract amount.
So this contract has between this year for the October 2016 to October 2017, and then to 2018, it has 2 more years?
2 more years.
Okay. I just wanted to make that.
Yes.
But see, instead of using the contract for the ad values,
Right.
he'll be able to use it for their actual work, not.
And that's why I anticipate.
So it's
with-
really
with-
not an increase?
No, and let me be very clear, you know, we are moving that upper level to accommodate for this year. But the way we're gonna run this going forward, they're only gonna be responsible for the messaging, the graphic content, those types of things. The amount of paid media that is purchased for customer education, that'll be coming out of my greater budget, not their contract. And so I anticipate that we'll spend less. You know, where in years 1 and 2, we spent $271 and $277. I anticipate in, next year that we probably won't reach that level. You know, we'll be somewhere lower than the 251 amount just simply because paid media won't be coming off of their contract.
If we could, just like we're increasing the maximum amount, we could decrease it next year if we chose to do so.
We could, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution.
Motion made, second, other discussion? Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Did you get that, Lee? Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. 7-0. All right, man. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us then back to number 9, presentation and discussion of financial and capital statements, financing options, audits, and financial policies of local power and light related to debt issuance issues, reserve account funding, cost allocation, revenue expense projections of local power and light. Mr. Burcham.
All right, I'll run through this relatively quickly because we have a lot on the in our budget presentation today. But start off with a graph that I've shown you every month. You can see where our rates are for the average residential customer that uses 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. We're at $89 today, which was dropped in February due to the pass-through of our power costs, about 11% decrease at that time. So you can see the difference in where we were in the October through January time period. The average customer was paying about $100.94, and since that time has dropped to $89. I know at the last meeting, Councilwoman Joy had asked how much sales tax and franchise fees would that bring that amount to, and so I wanted to throw that on. Too bad she's not here to see that. But that gives you a full picture of what that customer would pay, an average customer would pay just for their electricity portion of the bill. Overlaid on top of our rates are the rates that are charged by Xcel Energy. You can see that today they're at $98.11 for the average customer, still well above where we are.
And also I've thrown on the Texas average, which again, the Texas average is $100.62 today, still well above us. If over the last 3 years, LP&L customers paid $234 less than an average Excel customer, and they paid about $289 less than the Texas average customer would have paid. So still pretty exceptional.
Mr. Bell has a question.
Andy, would you back up to that sheet that had the franchise fee?
Yeah.
and that stuff?
Yeah.
Am I correct in understanding that the franchise, that the pilot payment of taxes percentage is applied not only to the bill, but also to the franchise fee?
No, the franchise fee is calculated, so this number here is 5% of this number. But then the tax, you add these two together, and then you apply the sales tax to that. So you basically are taxing the franchise fee, the sales tax. But remember, it's only 1.5%. It's only the city
Right,
portion
I
of
know
the
it's
sales
falling
tax.
out,
Yeah.
but we are taxing
Yes,
the
sir.
franchise.
That is correct.
We're taxing the tax,
Taxing
or whatever
the
you want to
fee,
call it.
whatever, yeah, whatever you want to call it.
And you didn't include the state tax.
There is no state tax on a residential customer. The residential customers only pay the city portion, which is 1.5%. Now, commercial customers, for the most part, pay the state portion of it, but not residents. All right, the next, oh, I'm sorry, did anybody
No, I was
else?
going to say, it's my understanding that you're going to address that in the bill to explain what's going on.
Yes, Mr. Bowman made a really good point this week. In our bill, it isn't real clear for customers how the taxes are applied, and I've talked to Jamie Cook. Jamie Cook is sitting over here against the wall, joining us today. She's going to be working on some language to add into the statements to make that a little bit clearer, so residents know they're paying the city portion only, and commercial, for the most part, are paying the state, county, and city portions. So, all right. This next graph is our pass-through of our purchase power that I show you each month, and you can see in the months where we have over-collected or under-collected. We've been in an over-collected status for the last number of months, and as you all recall, we did lower the pass-through rate in February, and we've started to see the over-collection come down, and even though it hasn't come down very much, this is about what we projected it to be. Where you will see the big difference will be once things start heating up in the summer, you will start to see us over-collect. We're anticipating that we'll under-collect about $6 million between now and the end of September. So our goal at this point, or our projections are, that we'll be back down to that big black line is where we need to be. If we're at the black line, that means we've collected revenues from our customers that equal the cost that we pay to Xcel Energy. So you see we're well above that right now, and that we are rebating that with these lower rates. That rate that would took us from $100 to $89 a month is going to really start under collecting once energy use really picks up for the summer months. So the good news in that is our rates won't change between our normal, our base rates will change, but the pass-through rate won't change between the end of May and the beginning of June. So there won't be quite as much rate shock for our customers beginning in the summer months this year. We'll still have the penny increase on the base rate, but we won't have the jump in the pass-through rates that we have seen in the past. Any questions on that? Quickly going through the balance sheet, you'll see this is as of March. You'll see that our cash and investments are up about $12 million. The receivables are down about $12 million. Our cash is inflated at the present time because of that over-collection to the tune of about $8 million. So between those two categories, cash and investments and receivables, we're typically down about $7 to $10 million at this point in time from the end of the last fiscal year being September 30th. So we're not seeing anything unusual at this point on the balance sheet. Restricted investments are our bond funds and our debt service reserves, down a little bit because of some bond payments that we've made. And then capital assets are down just slightly due to depreciation outpacing our addition of capital assets. On the liability side of the balance sheet, you'll see that our accounts payable about where they were at the end of the fiscal year. The second line is the deferred revenues. That's where we identify that over-collection on our balance sheet. So you can see at this point in time we're over-collected the $8.4 million, where at the end of the fiscal year we're at $2.2 million. So you can see how that grew pretty dramatically. So we'll be seeing that come down over the next several months. Customer deposits are down $1.4 million. David mentioned a moment ago that We've rebated about $2 million of deposits, so we've rebated about $2 million, but we've also had about $600,000 of new deposits come online since the end of September. Really, not much else to talk about. Bonds payable on the non-current liabilities are down $4.4 million related to a debt payment that we made in February. On the income statement, you can see our operating revenues are down about $9.4 million from this time last year. This is now comparing to the same time last year rather than to the year end. You can also see though down below on our expense side, purchase power is down $9.8 million. So that's the reason. Our purchase power costs are down, which are reflected in our operating revenues above. You can see our personal services, which include personnel costs and...
Question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you were about to touch on it. At personnel services, about nearly $1 million change in that.
Yes.
Further into that.
One difference between this time this year and last year, there's been one more payroll than this time last year, which is a portion of that. But also there are some expenses that have been booked on the operating statements that need to be in our capital program. In our distribution area, they've been booking a lot of their capital projects to the wrong accounts, and so we're working on an entry right now to move that. It'll come out of the operating, it'll be moved into the capital. At this point, I don't have an estimate on what that'll be. We're working on a good time tracking system, and so you'll see a little bit of inflated personal services and a little bit of inflated supplies and maintenance because of some of those charges just hitting the wrong category. We're going to fix that. So I think really those should be much closer in line with historical patterns than what we're seeing right now. Also on the supplies and maintenance category, we're up on water usage because of our cook units are operating, have been being called on. Some of those have been, so there's been a little bit more water usage there and added expense there, at least up to this point in time. So basically that covers you can see our $5.8 million change in net position compared to about $3.7 million last year. I think that'll become a little bit closer in line once we get the entries booked that need to be made to correct that. We're also down in consumption this year over last year, which would affect slightly our revenues on our base rates, down about 22 million kilowatt hours. That's only about a 1.9% decline from the same time last year. So it has a small impact, but it does have a little bit of an impact there. Budget comparison, we are really basically on track with where we would normally see ourselves. What I've done is in that third column, I put the percent of budget that we are today against this year's budget. And then the last column, I kind of looked at where we were at this time during the 14-15 fiscal year to kind of see. So you can see our consumer meters were about 38%, where we were about 39% last year, a little bit less. Off-system sales are the biggest difference. And the real difference there is the budgeted expectations there were a little extreme. Our modeling that we used, I think we anticipated those units being called on a lot more than they have been called on. So that's a little bit of the difference there. All other revenues are right on line with where we'd expect them to be. And then on the expense side, again, we're really very close. The one area that's a little bit out of whack is the fund level expenses, where we were at a much higher percentage last year than we are today. There was a bond entry that was booked at this point last year that hasn't been booked at this time. It won't be made until April. And so there's a little bit of a timing difference there. So that's really the only difference there. But all intents and purposes, we're basically on track with where we've been historically.
Any of y'all anticipate in all system sales when we're 6 months into the year that's...
Yeah, but keep in mind that the off-system sales, there's also a fuel expense on the expense side. So there's even though off-system sales revenues are way down, all fuel costs are way down too. So that the net margin will be probably a little bit less than what we would anticipated, but it shouldn't be too dramatic. At least we hope so at this point in time. Any other questions on the income statement? And then my last slide is just capital projects. We do have 46 capital projects that are open at the present time. The total amount of those are $52.6 million, and you can see the split out between what's funded with cash and what's funded with bonds, about 77% in bonds and 23% out of cash. And then down below you can see what expenditures were made this month out of the capital program, the Indiana Underground project being the largest, about $1.2 million. Oliver Substation is underway at about $800,000. So this month we've seen a larger amount of expenses occur through the capital program, which we would anticipate. Sometimes there's a long lead time on getting the design and engineering complete, but finally these projects, we're seeing some money being spent and some ground moved and lines put in place. So that kind of gives you an overview of all of that. So that wraps up my overview of the finances for March. So if y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
And you were very good. I appreciate your thoroughness on that. Your overall report.
You ready for budget?
Yes, sir.
All right, sorry. I was
No, it's all
waiting
right.
on an announcement or something. All right. All right, well, before you have about a
Oh.
280 page,
On item 10, I'm sorry.
yeah, have you called that up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Presentation discussion of the fiscal year 2016-2017 draft operating budget, capital program, and rate schedule. Terry, I'm sorry, I got past it. Go ahead, I'm
All
sorry.
right, now I'm good. Well, before you have a document that's about 225 pages long. It's been a lot of months of hard work. Chad and myself and a few others in the organization have spent a lot of time working on this and hope that it meets your expectations. There's some different components in here. First of all, some things I'll point out that are important for you to look at if you want a quick overview. There is a narrative that's 4 or 5 pages long that will give you a snapshot of the big items that have gone on through this budget. Following that is a financial model that includes all the numbers. It's kind of a dashboard in a way of all the changes that have been made in this budget, followed by some staffing overviews, some departmental and function overviews. Then the capital program is a significant portion of the book. And then finally the tariff. We gave you a clean version and we gave you a red line version, which really is the bulk of the book itself. But and we won't go over those in extreme detail today, but I guess it's a little bit different this year than last year. I think we gave you all the information a few days in advance of this meeting last year, and this time we are presenting it to you fresh, so I know you haven't had a chance to go through any of it and to formulate any questions, but as always, staff is available at all times to answer any questions that you have. Of course, we'll be bringing back another in-depth look at it in the June meeting. The timeline would be, that we would hope to get your approval of the budget at the June meeting. It'll then be folded into the citywide budget and will be presented in a workshop to the council in July. And then it'll be followed with different various public meetings in August and September until the budget is finally approved at the, usually the first meeting in September at the council level. So, the focus of this budget is pretty consistent with what we've seen in past year budgets, at least in the last 2 budgets that we brought to you. The first focus has been to continue to anticipate Lubbock's energy needs, and then secondly, to ensure that we're doing what our customers would expect and what they would expect of a well-run utility. So, first of all, the community does rely on us to provide reliable and affordable electricity. They also expect us to anticipate demand and to look out to the future and to invest in infrastructure that will keep the city in a good place for many, many years. And so because of those expectations, we're implementing a lot of future projects that will ensure that our power grid is reliable, stable, and is prepared for a long time. Second focus is on doing what customers expect, and just read this: reliability and capacity of our transmission, production, and customer information systems is vital and necessary to lay a foundation for 2019 and beyond. And I wanted to highlight some of the significant additions to our transmission grid that are proposed in this budget. In last year's budget, if you'll remember, we had a very large capital project that was just labeled transmission loop. And we knew that there was going to be significant transmission expense over the next several years. And so we put a placeholder there basically. But this year we have a lot more specifics. They will continue to be refined over time, but there's a large uptick in number of capital projects in your capital program this year, going from one really big one to a large amount of smaller projects, still substantial. But, you know, the big driver of our budget is the installation of this large infrastructure that will, for the most part, encompass a 115 kV outer loop and a 69 kV inner loop. You can see here in our capital program, this is for this upcoming year. We have $24.4 million of new line construction and line rebuilds in the budget. We have $11.3 million alone just for designing and engineering of future projects, which I know is a big number, but the amount of future projects that we'll be building with that design and engineering costs are $103.8 million. Significant build out of the transmission. And then finally, about $13.6 million of substation projects are also part of the overall plan. This is a map of the transmission grid as we ultimately will see it. The blue line is the outer 115 kV loop. The inner green line is the 69 inner loop. Kind of give you an idea, this is Avenue A on the east side, 34th there, Erskine up there, and Quaker on the west. The big outline, this is probably, I think this is 82nd Street. This is the west loop, north loop, and it goes all the way out to Milwaukee. So that kind of gives you an idea of the boundaries of that. But almost all of these lines have been insulated for 100, or most of the lines have been insulated for 115 kV, but they're operated under 69 kV today. So a lot of the work will be going into allow those outer blue lines to operate at 115 kV. And so that affects a lot of the substations. So almost every substation identified there, and most of those lines will have some sort of activity over the next several years. This is kind of a listing and a grouping together of projects within each type of category, and I have it listed by what's happening in the next upcoming fiscal year, 16-17. And then the next column is the costs anticipated in the future 5-year program, and then a total column. So you can see in total, over the next 6 years, $333 million worth of projects in total. Next year, $70.9 million in total. The biggest broken down here, you see about $16.3 million of line upgrades, $9.2 million of line rebuilds and reconductoring, followed by new substations at $8.8 million. So you can kind of see through the list. Again, this is kind of a roll-up of a large number of projects, but kind of gives you an idea of the magnitude of what's starting to happen next year. You know, this year's capital program is about $8 million. Well, that's the bond funded portion of it, 8 plus. So about $20 million this year, so jump into $71 million next year. The year following that, it gets into the $80 to $90 million range of the next 3 years are the big years where all this activity is going to take place. Another way to kind of slice this is, and this is just for next year, we've broken down, this is a budget, and Chad's going to go into more detail about this in a moment, but this is the first budget that we've created on the FERC Uniform System of Accounts. And we're doing that in order to ultimately recoup a lot of revenues for our transmission assets through ERCOT. And so there are 5 buckets here that we've split these capital projects into: the regional and general projects, distribution, production, transmission and distribution, and then transmission. And so you can see next year the bulk of our bond issuance and really our capital projects is in the transmission sector, which most of it's going to be transmission for the next several years as we bring our system up to standards for moving forward. You'll notice in next year that the breakout, I'll have it on here, 21% cash and 78% bonds. The goal that the board has put forward is that we'll fund 35% of our projects with cash and 65% with bonds. So we're not at that target today, but if you look at the long-term capital program, it started in the 13-14 fiscal year, extending to 21-22. It'll be right at that goal, the 35% cash and 65% bonds. So we're keeping that in our vision. But when we have large capital over the next couple of years, without having to increase rates, it's very difficult to keep that 35-65 split. So, but over time, we will meet that goal. Okay, that covers briefly the transmission piece, and that pretty much dwarfs all the other capital projects in our program. However, there is another significant set of projects that which relates to customer information systems, and I'll list these here. We have the 3 projects. You see they're much smaller in size compared to the others, but for next year we have $2 million for customer service information systems. We have $500,000 for mobile workforce management system and $1.8 million for transmission and distribution grid information systems. These aren't the full cost of these projects, but they are the initial phases of these projects. But first and foremost, one of the things that are included in this budget is a new billing system. The current billing system that we have was installed in 2001, so it's a 15, almost 16-year-old piece of software that is aged and very inflexible and inexpensive. But we're at a point where it's absolutely necessary that we replace our current billing system. One thing that the billing system will do, if you walk down in our customer service department now, you'll see on occasion CSRs having to reboot the computers and screens that are frozen on occasion. So it's very frustrating to our call center representatives, but also very frustrating for our customers. So that's just one side effect of an aged system. But and there's also many things that we can do for our customers. We want to empower our customers to manage their power and to be able to do that. And one way to do that is through a much more flexible billing system. It will also lay the groundwork for advanced meters. That has been in the capital program for the last couple of years into the future. We're now getting there. So you'll see in the program, this customer service information systems total project is about a 5-year project. It's about $42 million. So it's a significant project, but that includes a billing system. That includes the advanced metering and all the infrastructure related to that, data management systems, and the communications networks that are necessary for that. So that is the beginning steps of that project. We also have a mobile workforce management system that was installed in 2004. So it's an 11-year-old system. It's no longer supported by the vendor. We've actually had a number of episodes recently that we've had just to go paperless, which is, again, a customer service issue. We have difficulty getting the field service employees deployed in the field, getting the work done in a timely basis when we don't have a system accessible to us. This is a $1.5 million project with $500,000 paid in for next year. And then finally, we have a transmission and distribution grid information systems. This project also spans over a number of years. It'll continue the implementation of our outage management system. Today, we don't have an outage management system that's really very functional, and so that is important. There's a bunch of acronyms down here. Geographic Information Systems Upgrades, again, another antiquated system that we have. Distribution Management Systems, DMS. Energy Management Systems, EMS. We don't have either one of those, but modern utilities have these. These are the norm, and so these are things that we need to take care of and get in place. So I wanted to highlight that so you understand that that is also included in our budget. So I've laid out a pretty significant capital program very briefly, but one thing I did on the operating side of the equation, we've done a lot to cut costs because we are trying to find every conceivable way we can limit the amount of rate increases that we pass on to the customers. So this year we've found over $2.2 million in cost savings. The vast majority of that is related to the renegotiation of our contract with SPS and how we sell the power out of those unit contingent agreements to Xcel Energy. We will be mothballing 2 of our steam units at Cook, which it does drop our revenue slightly, but it has a significant impact on cost. $1.1 million reduction in compensation. This does not lay anybody off. This does not affect anybody that currently has a position. We're able to do this with attrition, with vacancies, cutting those. So no, it should be no concern for our employees. Then we also have about another $1.1 million in production cost savings related to savings in water and wastewater, which is about $600,000 of that. With shutting down those steam units at Cook, saves a significant amount of money on water cost. Also, chemical costs are significant to treat the water on those facilities, and then maintenance costs obviously comes down as well. We also have some savings in our customer service, mainly related to credit card transaction fees, as we've seen those come down recently, and we've changed that in our budget. Obviously, we had some other costs that did need to go up in this budget. related to becoming a transmission operator owner, to becoming ready for the ERCOT integration. However, if you look at our controllable costs, they're still down about $1.1 million from where we were last year. So even though we've saved 2.2, we added about 1.1, so still we're net down about $1.1 million, which we're very proud of that. So I've talked about all the things. Again, the biggest driver in our budget is the large capital program. You all are familiar with our rate management methodology, which is smaller, incremental adjustments are the most responsible way to manage the utility and support our customers. And so for the past 2 years, we had a 5.75% base rate adjustment, and that's what we're proposing again for this year and for the next 2 years. That has not changed over the last 2 years. We projected that. We can still maintain that, and so here is the impact of that. For the rate one, residential customer, it's a tongue twister. Service availability charge will increase 42 cents a month based on a 5.75% increase. The non-summer energy charge, which is a per kilowatt hour charge, goes up a little over 1/10 of a penny. In the non-summer months, which is October through May, the summer charge, which is June through September, goes up about 2/10 of a penny for the residential customer. And to put that in dollars and cents, during the non-summer months, again, the 8 months of the October through May, the impact would be $1.86. And remember, I don't have anything on the purchase power line because we pass that through. So whatever the purchase power costs are, we will pass that through. Currently, it looks like that'll be down a little bit for next year based on projections. But at this point, it's a $1.86 a month impact. And then in the summer months, it's a $2.51 impact to the average residential customer. If you average that out over the year, it's about a $2 increase per month for that average customer. All right. The book before you, it includes a model, which I think is very important. It's on page 5 of your document. But some of the things that we looked at this year, and I'm about to turn this over to Chad to go into some more detail, but...
Hey, Andy, before you move, I
Yes,
have
sir.
a question. I'm a little slow in the uptake. You said earlier your average 1,000 kilowatt customer is $89, the bill's about $89 a month.
That's right.
You're talking about an average $2 increase.
Yep. Now, okay. The increase is only on the base rate portion
Right,
of
so
the bill.
but overall, so really, when we think about it, even though it's a 5%, 5 point whatever percent, it's much smaller than that, the overall
Yeah, you
impact.
remember what it is on the total, on an average total bill? It's going to be...
2.5%.
Yeah, much smaller. So,
Okay.
so you're absolutely correct.
Okay,
The
Just wanna make sure.
the base rate portion is about a third of the residential customer's bill, so it's only an increase on that portion. Good point. I'm glad you made that point. The financial model that's incorporated here, which really kind of drives everything, like I said, is on page 5 of your document. It involves a number of things that we haven't had in there all along. This year, we've incorporated the integration of ERCOT into the model, so there'll be a few things in there that you'll see that involve some revenues and some expenses in the future related to that. Again, the significant capital investment is included. That's been in there before. It's just more refined this year. The Cook steam unit, the storage of that or the mothballing of that unit is included, so that, again, is related to those savings on our expense side that we factored into the budget. Again, the FERC uniform system of accounts, you'll see it quite a bit different this year. If you look at the cost center level and try to compare from year to year, it's just near impossible because we created about 8 new cost centers. We're also reallocating people based on what the FERC requirements are. So if you look at a cost center by cost center comparative, it's very difficult to kind of really know what's going on. So this year we've also included some functional areas, like we've included a distribution roll-up and a production roll-up and a customer service roll-up. So you can much more easily see the change between the years. So really this year, I think it'll be much easier for you to look at the change in those rolled up amounts rather than cost center by cost center. Transmission cost of service revenues have been factored into the future. That doesn't occur until 2021 and 21-22. We are using reserves in this budget. In this current fiscal year, we are going to dip into reserves to help relieve the possible rate increase that might have been necessary without that. So that's included. And then again, the base rate adjustment that I just talked about, the 5.75 on the base rate portion. And then just Yes.
If you don't mind
Yeah.
interrupting, you say on the reserves, that, how much would that be impacted though?
Well, on this slide right here, we're dipping into reserves this year about 670,000, and you can see in the next year about 260, and then we have a big year in 1920 of 6.7 million. That's when a lot of that debt really starts hitting, and that's really the year that we'll really dip into it. It will actually fall a little bit below our policy levels at that point, but we'll immediately emerge back out of that and back into positive territory right after that, because we'll have a bunch of different revenue streams and cost structure after that point in time. So if we can make over these through 1920, we'll be doing very well. So that kind of shows you what the use of the general reserve is. There's a little bit of color coding on this page, and I wanted to explain briefly kind of what that means. The first line there that's in orange, that is the revenues that we charge our customers for pass-through power. If you go down to the expense side, just down that page, you'll see 4 lines in orange. Those all add up exactly to that revenue. There might be a little bit of difference because of some different customer issues, but for the most part, that's almost an identical number. So that's why those are color-coded that way. The next one is this green line, which is our franchise fees. Again, down on the expense side, you'll see in green, those will add up to that. So that kind of helps you see that those are strictly pass-throughs on the revenues and the expenses. And we have a yellow line here, which is our power marketing sales. This is the power that we anticipate selling into the SPP integrated marketplace. Down below here is the fuel cost. So really, if you take the difference in those, that's our net margin on the sale of power sales. So that kind of gives you an idea. That way you can kind of tie those issues together on the revenue and expense side. The other thing I want to point out is I have a few cells in blue. Those are expenses or revenues related to ERCOT transition. What we've done in 2021 and 21-22 is we've started adding in revenues related to those transmission cost of service revenues that we anticipate. And out of conservatism in this budget, we've assumed an 18-month bridge in SPP. And so instead of expecting revenues to come in sooner, we've moved them out. So this is about 10 months worth of revenue. This is a full 12 months of revenue. And that's only on the lines within our transmission system. That does not include any possible revenues that we might receive if we're awarded lines that we build out to interconnect us to the ERCOT grid. And then down below here is that cost of that bridge that I mentioned a moment ago. Since we're trying to be conservative here, we have factored in a bridge estimated cost for an 18-month period beginning in June of 19 going through December of 20. So I just wanted to highlight those so y'all know that we have factored in. We feel like this is somewhat conservative without being too conservative. We're hoping to be walking a fine line there. So with all of that, I'll turn it over to Chad unless y'all have any questions. Yes, sir.
One of the somewhat mild criticisms that our bond rating agencies had expressed when they issued their reports and you sent them to us was that we're a little bit underfunded on our reserves compared to the industry average. I think they said we had 4 months in reserves and the industry average was 6 months. Am I correct in that?
I think where they were showing that we were a little bit light was on the amount of cash that we have on hand. They look at more of a days cash on hand measure, and we are a little bit lower than the norm there, maybe, but not significant enough to make a change in our ratings. Now the reserves I think are really more in line with industry standard. We are at 90 days of revenues, and actually
we have a charter requirement, of course, too.
we do. Let's see here. Right now, our ordinance states that we take that it has to be 90 days of your general consumer meters, which would be these two lines here, the 67 million and 146 million. So we have to have 90 days worth of that. Industry standard, though, looks at the expense side and takes 90 days of that. Actually, ours is a little bit healthier than that, than the industry standard, which is 90 days, because our general revenues are greater than our operating expenses anyway. And so I don't think we have a problem with reserves from a rating agency standpoint. I think that that's not as much their problem, I think, as being a little bit slim on the days cash on hand. And really the only way to do that is to boost reserves even higher, which kind of goes back to your question of, are they really high enough? They kind of seem to separate those a little bit, but I think those reserves are adequate for a rating, at least a AA rating that we have.
Andy, can I stop you right there for
Yeah.
just a second? I'm
Yeah.
going to have to leave the meeting to
sorry.
go to another meeting. So appreciate all the detail. I'm sure get with you on some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be ready to answer any questions if y'all have
I
anything.
look forward to that next week. And Mr. Bell's going to take over.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Any other questions before I turn it over to Chad?
Is there any action plan of any kind in FY17 for smart metering?
In 16-17, it'll be the kind of requirements gathering, the scoping of the project, the hiring of the consultants, the identification of what meters we'll be needing to go with. There will be no deployment of any meters in 16-17. That would have to occur later. There's a lot of backroom work that Dana and Jamie will be working on over the next several years, but over next year specifically to get this up and going for actual deployment, which would occur probably in the 17-18 or 18-19 fiscal years.
Any other questions?
All right.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'll see if I can go through this fairly quickly. Andy touched on a lot of what I was going to talk about, so I'll be able to skip over quite a bit. So I'm going to start at a high level, just a global overview, and then we'll delve into those functions that Andy talked about. First thing I want to talk about was this is just total budget, what it looks like. You can see our funding sources are down about $7.3 million. Total expenses are down about $6 million, and out of that, and Mr. Conrad's already touched on this, the impact on net assets is we're going to draw down the reserves that Andy talked about to the tune of about $670,000. Another item Andy touched on was here in our department level expenses. They're down about $10.4 million. Out of that 10.4, what we control is about 1.1 million. The remaining 9.3 is related to the fuel related to power marketing and purchase power. Department level expenses. I'm going to talk about compensation, benefits, supplies, fuel, and purchase power. But a couple that I just want to hit at a high level. You can see maintenance and capital outlay reimbursements, for all intents and purposes, are flat for this fiscal year. And scheduled charges, it's down $388,000. And I just want to mention that that is still a fairly fluid number at this point. The city finance department is actually still working on their budget and scheduled charges. And so based on our analysis and our best guess, that's kind of where we think it'll come in. And that already incorporates the water and sewer savings related to the steam units that have been mothballed. So we expect a little bit of an increase in other places. So compensation and benefits, you'll notice that it went down a little bit, about $600,000, and that's largely due to the fact that we have charged more time to, or we budgeted more time to the capital program than we have historically. Our production department has started to do that, and then Jamie and Dana's group working on the billing system. As that becomes a big capital project, we're going to budget some of their time in order to capture that capital asset. Health insurance increased about $652 per full-time employee. Workers' comp went down $143,000, and a salary increase of 2% is included for all full-time employees, and that matches at least what the city has planned at this point in time. That could change. Overall, and I will delve into these details by function, but overall you can see that our staffing didn't change. We've shifted a bunch, but we're still at 303 employees. And this is the detail on the staffing changes that we made. All the cuts on the left side, those are all related to the production reorganization related to the mothballing of those steam units. So essentially what we did was eliminated these 7 vacant positions and then we moved the rest of the staff over to Brandon and Massengale. And so I think the plan is to run the production units remotely. What we've added is an electric cybersecurity compliance specialist. So we have compliance for everything but this, and the city's IT department just does not have the resources to be able to do this on our behalf. So essentially what this is going to do is monitor cyber attacks on our network through like the SCADA system. Legal assistant to help out Garrett and Richard, and then the rest are all transmission and distribution related, which makes sense because that's the direction that we're heading with our capital investments. So it's 2 engineering assistants, 1 associate, and 2 GIS data analysts. So you can see that we cut $566,000 of salaries and we added back 324. So that's a net positive for the budget. So I just wanted to walk you through quickly on compensation. So last year's budget was $16.1 million for compensation, and we ended up at 15.5 this year. So I've already talked about allocating salaries to capital here. We cut these 7 positions, added these 7 positions. The 2% salary increase is about $353,000, and then we've had several retirements this year, so that $390,000. So when someone retires, we typically have somebody at a lower pay rate come in and take their spot, and then we've also reclassified some vacant positions that were higher paid and made those work for what we need to fit our needs, and those have been lower paid positions as well. Benefits typically follow the same pattern as compensation, and it does in every case with the exception of hospital insurance that I've already mentioned. And so you can see that TMRS and FICA are down as you would expect since compensation's down. I like to separate out supplies from fuel and purchase power because supplies gets lost in the noise of fuel and purchase power just because they're such big numbers. So supplies on its own, you can see that chemicals, cleaning, and safety supplies decreased about $277,000, offset by small increases in small tools and office supplies throughout the organization. But we decreased about $200,000 in supplies, and that's again related to the changes out at Cook Station. Fuel, this is the single biggest change that we have in the budget this year, and I wanted to go into a little bit more detail to kind of explain our thought process and kind of how we arrived at the number that we did. In 15-16, that was the first year that we were actually a market participant selling or bidding our units into the SPP integrated marketplace. And so essentially we set up a model without getting too far into the weeds that looked at gas prices, locational marginal prices, heat rates, and a number of other variables to look at theoretically when would our units be called on. One thing that has not occurred is that our units haven't been dispatched quite like we expected. And so what we've done in this year's model, we've taken that same model and we've updated it with the historical dispatches that we've seen over the last year, and so we've made the model much more conservative. So you can see that the prices decreased pretty dramatically because we're essentially assuming that it's going to run in late spring, so May through September essentially, whereas opposed to the model last year assumed that the model or that the units would be called on throughout the year. So we're always looking to continue to gather data and improve our model, and so that's something that we'll continue to work on. Purchase power is the biggest component of our budget. You can see that energy and fuel is down about $4.1 million. That's largely due to projected lower gas prices. This time last year, we budgeted about $3.88 million per million or MMBTUs, and this year we're at 2.97. So that one's pretty easy to follow. Transmission costs are up and offsetting that savings in energy and fuel to the tune of about $4.4 million, and we have that budgeted in our forecast model based on load growth and continued investment in transmission throughout SPP. In fact, XL even has some stuff on their website that they have created 3 new transmission companies to compete in this environment, and they have plans to invest over $2 billion in the next 2 years. So I think we'll continue to see transmission costs in SPP go up. Finally, capacity. This is really where we anticipate saving money in purchase power in the coming year. SPS, part of our full requirements agreement, SPS trues up the capacity costs looking back 12 months and then sets a rate for the next 12 months. This time last year, we thought that the capacity rate would be about $7.70 per kW. And this year, based on what we know, we're anticipating that to be about $7.28. So the last big item from a global perspective is the professional services budget. It went up about $341,000. The biggest piece, outside legal services, we have about $500,000 budgeted there, and we expect that to be spent based on our transition to ERCOT and contested cases and a lot of stuff that Richard could tell you about. Professional services, we've made several cuts. One of those being we had dollars in 2019 studies to the tune of about $600,000, and we've cut that back to around $300,000. Andy mentioned earlier that we've got lower credit card transaction fees, and so you can see that cut of about $75,000. And then we have training and travel increases of $114,000. That's largely due to required training that we'll have to have for a lot of the folks in distribution and transmission related to becoming a transmission owner and operator, and then just maintaining the skills and staying sharp in terms of the folks that we have. Finally, the big piece is contracted services of $125,000. Our engineering staff is really pretty overwhelmed, which is why you saw all the additions to the engineering department. But this $125,000, well, it's actually a $125,000 increase, but will allow for our engineering department to basically outsource all of our engineering to a master engineer that can handle all of the transmission upgrades that Andy discussed earlier. At the fund level, you can see debt service is up about $750,000. That's completely due to the debt that we issued this fiscal year. Our transfers to the city are down just a little. Transfer to capital is up about $4 million. Overall, total expenses are down about $6.1 million. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the FERC uniform system of accounts because I feel like Andy touched on that. These are our big functions: admin, production, distribution, transmission, and customer service. I'm just going to walk you through quickly each of those functions at a high level.
Chad,
Yes.
We don't have a quorum.
Might stop for just a second. We lost it.
I don't want to. We're good? Okay. So this is the staffing changes in admin, and I've already touched on the electric cybersecurity compliance specialist and the legal assistant. The overall admin budget went up about $700,000. I've highlighted in blue the changes that make up that. $510,000 is related to professional and training, with $500,000 being for outside legal counsel. Scheduled charges, still a pretty dynamic number. We're not sure where that's going to end up, but based on our guess, it's up about $116,000. And then maintenance is up $80,000, which is related to the maintenance of this building. Depending on the needs of the building, it may be a maintenance issue or it may be capitalized depending on what we need.
You did mention that professional and training, that is necessary.
$500,000 of that 510 is the $500,000 of that 510 in the admin function is specifically related to outside legal counsel. And I'll show you when I get to distribution and transmission, you'll see more of the training costs there. So production, this is a more zoomed in view of the changes. And so you can see Cook Station went from 15 to 0, and we basically shifted everybody to Massengale. So we've cut 7 positions and transferred 1 to distribution. You guys can read, so I'm not going to read to you each of those, but it's several plant foremans and 1 chemist and a couple of control room operators. Overall, when you look at the production budget, it's down $11.5 million, but again, it includes fuel and purchase power costs, which make it difficult to see what the production department is doing outside of those issues. So when you take those out, production is down about $2.3 million, and everything that is down is related to the mothballing of Cook Station. Transmission and distribution, Andy kind of touched on this earlier.
I'll tell you what, since we're about to lose our quorum, all of these details, the functional areas, we don't have to go over them right now. We can always touch on them again at the June meeting, but if y'all want to, we could hit the tariff real quick, just to give you an overview of some of the changes there. If that's okay with everybody, and then we can go into more detail at the June meeting or throughout the month if you have questions. Is that okay with the board? Okay, sorry.
Oh, that's good. All right, so one of the big changes that we've added is net metering for commercial customers. Basically the same idea as the net metering that we have for residential. Small commercial typically uses about 1,000 kilowatt hours, and you can see if they use, we've put a table together based on if they produce a quarter of their usage all the way up to 100%, and they could save up to $51 if they produce all of their solar. Rate 16, this is our large commercial. In the summer, they could save about half of their bill. In the winter, about the same. Net metering rates, customers that have net metering are going to be required to sign an interconnection agreement and be on the net metering rate. And if they're a commercial customer on a net metering rate, they're not eligible for the time of use rate. Additionally, we've added a 6-month look back, and this implements a 6-month historical adjustment looking backwards for valid rate disputes or meter reading inaccuracies. And really, we're just doing this to mirror what the PUC does. Demand cap, if you guys will remember, we planned a 4 or 5 year phase out of the demand cap, and the demand cap is essentially an old rate it's an old function of a commercial rate that was copied from an SPS that they did away with a long time ago, and it essentially incentivizes inefficient use of our system. So we implemented phase 1 last year, and we're implementing phase 2 this year. So just to give you a basic example, for a customer that uses 175,000 kWh and about 3,500 kW, right now they're only paying for about 2,600 of the kilowatts that they're using out of the 3,500. So by adjusting that divisor to from 67 to 58 hours, we'll now have that customer paying for about 3,000 of the kW. And so you can see it's less than the 20% that we anticipated last year. And this is the customers that are impacted by class. The biggest change coming in rate 16 secondary, 753 last year, 694 this year, and we've got 59 that fell off, which means we've got 59 more customers paying their full load for KW where they weren't last year. So it's working. And in terms of a dollar impact, our estimated dollar impact is about $177,000 and about $250 a year, which works out to about $22, $23 a month on average. So in a nutshell, that's the tariff. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that you guys have.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Andy. Chad and Andy, excuse me. What did I say?
Thank you, Andy and Andy. They're brothers, but they're from a different mother.
Anyway, if there's no further questions on the budget, items 12 and 13 have been pulled, so if there's nothing else to do with the ratepayers of Bud Parent Light. And by the way, they asked me to bring, since Glenn couldn't be here today, they asked me to bring this to the festivities starting at